Welcome to the Defense and Aerospace Report. I'm Vago Muradian here in Northern Virginia for what is our last Farnborough International Air Show interview. The air show was a few weeks ago, where our coverage was sponsored by Farnborough International and Leonardo DRS. And we're here to talk to Bill Lynn, the CEO of Leonardo DRS, who we didn't get an opportunity, Bill, to see you at the air show. So we thought, all right, well, we'll do the last air show interview here in Washington, and you were kind enough to agree to that. Did you have a good air show?
We had a very good air show, Vago, and it's a lot to be excited about in the transatlantic relationship. We were certainly focused on the T-100. We had one of the M346s there, and a lot of traffic through that. A lot of attention to Leonardo's helicopter division as well, and so for us it was a very successful air show.
You mentioned the transatlantic relationship, and one thing that came through in a lot of the interviews was concerns about the future of the transatlantic relationship. There were concerns about the steel and aluminum tariffs and an expanding trade war. Since then, we've seen the president have a constructive meeting with Jean-Claude Juncker, the European Commission president. But from your standpoint, are there any indicators of stress from the standpoint of a CEO of an American company with Italian ownership, but that does business globally?
No, I mean, as you noted, we're an American company. Leonardo DRS is under a proxy, so we're an American company in the American market. We do bring Italian technology into that market, as we're doing with the T-100, but that's, I think, a good thing, as it gives the U.S. soldier, sailor, airman, and marine access to the broadest panoply of technologies, and we're able to bring that technology through an American company into the U.S. and produce things with American jobs.
Is there any impact at all from either on the tariff side of the business or on any of counter tariffs and anything that's touching anything that you guys are doing ultimately?
Right now, I mean, I think the impact of the tariffs would be, for us, would be the steel aluminum tariffs mostly. Financially, the impact there is quite modest. I think the worry is, does it cause instability with the suppliers? We're starting to see a little indication of that, and that suppliers want to give you quotes for shorter periods of time because they're not quite sure what's coming. I think right now, it's not grave at this point, but if it led to a lot of instability in the supply base, that would ultimately be a problem. We're not there yet, but that's the concern.
The entire time I've known you, you've always been sort of a proponent for free trade, whether you were the deputy secretary, whether you were the comptroller in your earlier iteration during the Clinton administration. The administration is working an industrial strategy. It's been getting inputs from all the government departments. The Pentagon put its input in. This is sort of an industrial risk assessment, but it's also going to have mitigation features to it. And there are some who have a little bit of concern that, an America First, Buy American administration, it may, from their standpoint, negatively shape potentially industrial strategy in the country. From your perspective, what do you, and I know that you're among a group that includes Aerospace Industries Association and NDIA that have made your voices clear on this. From your standpoint, what is it from, what would you like to see out of any strategy that comes out of the administration at this point when it comes to defense industrial strategy?
Well, I think what you have to focus on is that we need global access to technology. We can't limit our access to technology to just a sub-segment, just U.S. technology. Technology is a global marketplace, and the American fighting man and woman needs access to that. Now, I think you can do that and still protect American jobs. You can build things here with technology brought in overseas, just as we would do with the T-100. And I think that's the path forward. Global technology, American jobs.
Speaking of American jobs, there was a rally. It's not often that a defense contractor's name is mentioned at a rally, but the president had a rally in Florida to support the Republican candidate there. And you guys got a mention on that. in terms of sort of jobs being created. From your standpoint, where do you think the job growth is going to be? You guys had this is the fourth year in a row where you guys have posted very, very handsome returns for the year. From your standpoint, where is that investment going to be going? In what states and in what sort of market areas do you think that you guys are going to be experiencing growth?
Well, I mean, I think the primary areas we're seeing growth right now is in our Army business, both in the sensor side as well as the computing side and the platform side. All elements, we're seeing substantial growth in those Army markets. We're also seeing we have an naval electronics business, and that's growing substantially as well. And of course, if we win the T-100, that would be game-changing growth.
And speaking about T-100, that down select decision is supposed to happen in the fall. Much anticipated, obviously, with Boeing partnered with Saab in it, Lockheed partnered with Korea Aerospace Industries, and you guys sort of on your own bringing your modified version of the T-100 into this, or rather, I should say, the T-100 is a modified version of the 346 trainer that you guys have that you've committed to be building in Tuskegee, Alabama. Talk to us about where you are, right? But final bids are going in soon, right?
Yes. I think they're in the final stage of the submission. The Air Force has talked about an award. I think September was the last interview that I saw. I don't know that that's firm, but I think they're in a position to meet that kind of time frame. And yeah, we are obviously anticipating which way this is going to go.
And you're pretty bullish?
You never know at this point in a competition, Vago.
That's right. You don't want to tempt the contracting gods of fate. There is a lot of debate and discussion about industrial base playing into this. I know that every time we've talked about it, you're like, look, this is pretty straightforward. It's about the quality and the price that you can give that quality for. Do you have any inkling at all whether there is going to be any sort of industrial base consideration? I mean, you know all the talk that happens, whether it's something positive the president may say about another leader, or whether it's, well, for industrial base reasons, you wouldn't want to do this or you wouldn't want to do that. From your standpoint, it's no indication nor even any language in the competition regarding that.
I think it's separate lanes, Vago. The competition is very tightly written. RFP. Industrial base is not one of the criteria, and I fully expect the Air Force to follow the criteria they had in the RFP. And whoever comes out best on those criteria is going to win. There's not going to be a consideration of who needs it most or something in those. Industrial base, I think, is a broader set, as you noted, a broader set of concerns and a wider aperture. As you said, the department's taking a look at industrial base as part of a study they started really almost the first day of the administration. They're looking at industrial base in terms of sectors, in terms of suppliers and sub-suppliers. Can we get what we need to build what we want? And I think if they find there are issues, they come up with a plan to deal with those issues. But it's not a plan that's dependent on individual competitions. That's, as I said, in a separate lane.
And then if you would do it, you would do that upfront in the requirement or in the original request for proposal so that everybody understands what they're dealing with.
If you were going to deal with it in proposals, you would do it that way. There are other ways to do it. You could fund certain elements of the industrial base. You could decide to buy more of something a little bit earlier to support the industrial base. You could try and get your primes to diversify suppliers. There's a lot of different policies that you could follow, and I think the department, as they finish this industrial base study and come to their conclusions, will use the full toolbox.
So you've committed to building the jet. Should you win the contract? Should the positive call, right? I mean, I don't know whether it would be the secretary or Dr. Roper or whoever gives you a call and gives you the news. If it's good news, then you would be building it in Tuskegee. At what point do you start making decisions? At what point do you start breaking ground? Because I know there is an engineering, manufacturing, development phase. So so talk to us a little bit about, insofar as you can, what that schedule looks like in terms of setting up a capability in the United States.
Sure. Well, we already have an agreement with the state of Alabama and Tuskegee that this is where we will build the TX, the T-100. As soon as we have a signed contract, we will break ground. We will move forward to finalize those agreements, and we will move immediately forward so that plant is up and running well before the completion of the EMD phase.
And first deliveries would be ballpark when? Because it slipped a little bit, right? It was 2021, but it's going to be a little bit later than that?
I think you're going to not be able to trust me completely. It's 2021, 2022, I think, are the first deliveries.
And let me ask you just one other, from an industrial-based perspective. You know, there was some, the feel a little bit at Farnborough, to bring it back a little bit to the beginning, there was a little bit of a feel that folks, that overseas companies that have roles on American programs may be vulnerable. You know, you kept getting this feel, whether they were British companies or, you know, other companies, European companies, that, hey, we feel already subtle pressure to push us off. Air Tuning has, you know, in an interview assured that no, you know, none of that's going on. You know, we're still committed to maintaining our partnerships and alliances. Do you feel any pressure at all? I mean, even though you're an American company, but, you know, there are some folks who see the Leonardo part of it in front of DRS. Do you feel any pressure at all on any of your programs?
No, to the contrary. We've been very successful the past couple of years. As you said, we're in the middle of our fourth year of above market growth. So we haven't seen pressure, and indeed we have even teamed with not just Leonardo from Italy, but we've been teaming with, for example, Rafael out of Israel on the active protection system that we just won. And earlier we teamed with another Israeli company, IMI, to win the Joint Assault Bridge. So again, I think there was that welcoming of foreign technology. Now we're building them here. It's going to be American jobs, but the Defense Department's going to get the best of global technology taking this approach.
That's right, and we talked to Yoav Har-Even, the retired Israel Army Major General, who's the CEO of Rafael, and talked about that win and the capabilities, and the next series of adaptations on lighter weight vehicles, which is also part of the program. Let me ask you about budget. You know a thing or two as the deputy secretary who suffered massive budget scars while you were in office, and you know, you used to be a lot taller than you used to be, but you were also a comptroller. You worked budget and finance issues also when you were on the Hill in the Senate. How do you gauge the budget environment? You know, there's this sense that, and you and I have talked about this a couple of times, you know, 18 was strong, 19, another strong year, 20, sort of a more flattening year. I mean, how do you, you know, as the CEO of a business that, you know, has experienced a lot of growth, you're always trying to make sure that you're positioning yourself in the event that, you know, growth that we expect might not be there. What's your budget projection? What's your guess as you look at the fiscal situation? Because it's very dynamic. We have an uncertain political. We don't know what's going to happen in the election. You know, obviously there are some folks who see Democrats winning. There are others who see Republicans retaining control. The debt has grown and is growing even more rapidly. I mean, the tax cuts, you know, certainly were beneficial in some respect. On the other hand, it increases the national debt, and there's also been a revenue decline. The calculation being that eventually the economy outgrows that decline. But, you know, it's kind of a dynamic picture. You know, how do you see the future of defense spending?
Well, in the short term, it's pretty well defined. We have the agreement, the 2-year agreement that covers this year, fiscal 18, and next year, fiscal 19, with a substantial increase, I think a more substantial one than most people anticipated. And equally importantly, it gives stability for DoD planning. Without that kind of agreement, and with the sequester looming over, it introduced enormous instability, made it hard for industry to invest, it made it hard for DoD to plan, and so I think that short-term agreement has helped enormously. When you get to fiscal 20, obviously you're back into a world where you're going to have to come up with some sort of approach. I think, as you mentioned, deficits are going up. I think the good news here is there's a fairly broad bipartisan consensus for relatively robust levels of defense spending. I mean, different from the days of the end of the Cold War and the desire for a peace dividend. I think the different parties have different other priorities, but in terms of the national defense, there is a fairly broad consensus. So that consensus, while sometimes hard to operationalize into an agreement, I think gives you great hope that there would be then a subsequent agreement, presumably 2 years. I mean, everybody would like more, but the 2 years has been the pattern, and it seems to be the kind of the limit of the political dialogue at this point. And that's, at this point, that would be my anticipation. Whether it would be high growth, I'm not so sure, but I think it would be inflation or a little bit better.
And heck, if we just hold our breaths long enough, it'll the entire budget agreement expires in 2021. So I'm not encouraging anybody to hold their breath that long. But going forward, even if there's a flattening out, how do you see yourself positioned in terms of the budget lines? So even if you did see a flattening, do you still project continued growth in terms of the amount, the sort of the segments of the budget that you'll have access to?
We've had a substantial string of wins over the past couple of years, and what we're in the middle of now is executing the option years on those wins, and that's the heart of our growth over the next couple of years. I don't see a budget environment which would be so draconian that the department would reverse field on those and not exercise options or cancel programs. I think it's a question of is it going to be kind of inflation, or is it going to be a little bit better than inflation? And how many new programs get introduced? What's the rate of buy? But I don't see major reversals that would undercut what we've already won.
And anything in the 19, as the 19 sausage, FY19 sausage is being made, do you see any, what's the good news, the bad news, as you're looking at that, as somebody who's more familiar than most at looking at budget documents, what do you see as good news? What do you see as maybe not as good news?
I mean, I think the good news, I don't see any major deal breakers in there. I don't see big, there's always going to be disputes between the houses, between the parties, but I don't see ones that are going to cause the bill itself to be derailed, that they will get worked out in the normal course of business. So I think, again, that stability from the budget agreement has extended into the bills this year, and the people are working through their policy and budget disagreements in an orderly fashion.
And any girding or concern about a potential government shutdown? Because the president has made it clear, on the border wall and on immigration what he wants, and if he doesn't get it, he's going to shut the government down. There are Republicans who are pretty concerned about that message going into an election year. From your standpoint, any maneuver or thinking that you're considering at this point at all?
We haven't done any planning in that regard, no.
Bill, thanks very, very much. It's always a pleasure, and best of luck, and we'll see what happens in September.
Great. Well, thanks, Vago. It's always a pleasure.